Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining our Wellbeing talk today. We'll just give everyone a minute or two to pop on. I can see the numbers just adding up here, so we'll wait a minute or two. Thank you. So good morning, everyone. I think we'll kick off. The numbers are climbing as we've started, but obviously we're on quite a tight schedule for everyone. So I'm Marcella MacArthur. I'm one of the welfare case managers. Sorry, could I just ask everyone to mute their mics, please?
Later. All right then. Yeah. Cheers then, Mum. You too. Bye then. Bye.
Start again, everyone. Sorry about that. First of all, if everyone can have their cameras off and their mics muted, it just helps for things to run a little bit more smoothly at this side. So as I said, my name's Marcella. I'm one of the case managers here at the EIC charity. So on the 10th of September, it's World Suicide Prevention Day. And in honour of this, we have talk today by Francesca and Lucy. Where the topic is suicide prevention, grief and the ripple effect. Now, today's discussion could potentially be triggering for some, so please, if you have to pop off the call, feel free to do that and then just rejoin if you feel comfortable. The session today will be recorded, so it will be distributed at a later time. You will have time to ask questions at the end, but as we go through the presentation, if there's any comments or questions, just please pop them in the chat and we'll monitor them as we go along. So without further ado, I want to hand over now to Lucy and Francesca.
Thank you so much, Marcy. It's so interesting being this side of things. I feel a bit nervous than I normally do. But yes, I work for the EIC, so I'm Lucy. I'm a case manager. I've been here for 3 years now. While I am a case manager, I'm also studying on the side as well to one day become a therapist. And alongside that as well, I'm the co-founder of the incredible Ben Ramers Foundation. So this was set up in memory of my beautiful brother Ben. So the chap that you can see on the screen here. We lost him to suicide in May 2019. He was a professional skateboarder, and that's why this talk is just so important, especially to align with World Suicide Prevention Day. So I will hand over now to my incredible cousin to tell you a bit about herself as well, who is also working alongside me at the foundation to do incredible things.
Thanks, Lucy. Just a heads up to everyone, I had a baby 3 weeks ago, so I apologise now if my words sometimes get a bit I pause or I get mixed up, so yeah, just bear with me. But yeah, I'm also, as Lucy said, I'm also a trustee of the Ben Ramers Foundation. My day job is in the corporate world, so I work in a law firm doing innovation and change, but alongside that, at the law firm, I do a lot around their mental health and well-being as well, to change the stigma around suicide, and to make sure they've got the services in place as well. I'm not currently, but I also am usually a listener at the listening place. So this is an amazing service that we'll mention at the end of the talk, but it's a space for people who are suicidal to open up and to talk and to have a listener, and it's a free service as well. So yeah, that's my nutshell and focus for mental health. So today, me and Lucy want to cover these 3 important topics. I think there's always a huge focus on suicide prevention, and not enough noise around the grief and the ripple. So this is why we wanted to put these 3 elements together. We're also going to do a little bit at the end around our lived experience through our eyes of how to support someone that's going through suicide grief as well. So hopefully that's some interesting and insightful takeaways for everyone to take with them after this webinar. We're going to play a short video now, which is just a minute long. This is a little snippet of a Vice documentary that we put together at the foundation. It gives you a little sort of insight into Ben, a little bit of the why we set up the foundation, a bit about Lucy and me, and then it should sort of scene set for the rest of our talk. So I'll hand over to Lucy, who's going to play the video for us.
Cheers.
It's your own pressure on your own shoulders, that you feel like you got to do this, like that they're expecting you to do something, you know, and nobody really talks about that part of like being a pro skater.
A handful of people can skateboard to the level that Ben can skateboard. If you go skating with Ben, he'd quite often just sit down and watch, or he'd just be really enthusiastic about what you were doing.
He would always not want to skate in front of people because he's like self-conscious or like worried. It was always like a bit of a battle because he felt out of place.
When the police came to tell me, I looked at him and I said, "What's happened to my brother?" I just thought he was going to say to me, "Ben's overdosed and he's in a coma," or "He's thrown himself off something but he's in hospital." And then, yeah, he started crying and he couldn't get the words out. I was in complete shock.
So someone takes their own life every 40 seconds. 5,224 lives were lost to suicide in England and Wales in 2020, and 75% of these suicides are men. I think every time we see that statistic, it really, really hits home, and really shows the importance of these talks and spreading awareness around suicide and normalising these conversations that can bring challenges to talk about, but the only way change happens is if we do talk about them. So a bit of background around my brother. So Ben, he was a professional skateboarder. When he was around age 10, we went to a skate park and he saw some skateboarders and he just said to my mum, he's like, "I want a skateboard." And he quite literally got on one and just never came off of it until the day that we lost him. His career saw him go just from strength to strength. He was just something really special within the skateboarding world. Everybody you speak to said he had this style that was just different. And his manager would say, "Ben, try and do this trick," and Ben could just do it. His level of what he could do on a skateboard was something I think that had never really been seen before. Growing up in our family, our mum battled addiction and our dad left when I was 6 weeks old. And there was an awful lot of trauma around what we went through, what we were experiencing and what we were exposed to. And Ben's skateboard, I always say it's like he was skateboarding away from the trauma. Everything that was happening for Ben, he was taking out on his skateboard. It was a real escapism for him. But what came with skateboarding culture, especially at that time, in the 90s and early 2000s, the culture was very much like rock and roll lifestyle, drinking, drugs, partying. And because Ben was so young when he started, he was skateboarding with managers and professional skateboarders that were a lot older than him. So again, he was being exposed to a culture that was very normalized around that time and almost glorified, I'd say. In the midst of this as well, when Ben was in school, he was going away touring with skateboarders. He was being taken out of school. And I think because of our mum's addiction and where she was at, it was kind of okay. But my auntie, my cousin Francesca, I remember her saying, you know, "Marion, this is it's amazing Ben's doing this, but that is a lot for, you know, a young boy in his school years, and to be going out and doing that." And I think at that time, especially in school, it's so difficult. You really need stability. So Ben going away on these, it was very fractured, his school days. And then on top of that, Ben developed eating disorder. He had bulimia, which I think stemmed from a lot of lack of control. And the National Eating Disorders Association statistic for eating disorders in men is 1 in 3 people are male. And again, I think when Ben was younger, this wasn't really something that was spoken about. And I think now there's definitely more noise around it, which is amazing. But something that, again, then was very difficult to try and navigate through. So yeah. Oh, sorry, I've just skipped through. Now I'll pass over to my cousin Chess.
And just to add on the suicide prevention, there might be people listening to this webinar thinking, oh, Ben's life is an extreme version. It's, you know, he was a professional sportsman, he was in the limelight. This would never affect me in terms of suicide prevention or someone else. But I think it's really good to emphasize here that suicidal thoughts can happen to people at any time in their lives. You don't have to be this extreme sportsman like Ben in the limelight to be affected. It can be anything from money worries, relationships, change of jobs, stability. And I think there's more awareness that needs to happen around how just life and change of events can lead to people to this place of suicidal thoughts. It's not just the extremities of Ben as such. So to give you a bit of a background of sort of what we're doing at the foundation and why we are doing it. I remember chatting to Lucy in those sort of first few months after we lost Ben, and our sort of aim was just to help one family not go through what we've gone through. And there was this idea of what could we do, and that was all based as well on the reaction of the global world around us of losing Ben. Very much, what can we do here? How can we help this community? How can we help other families? So our main focus is very much on the suicide prevention, and in terms of outputs of what that looks like, it's doing the training, suicide awareness training with people, so that they feel comfortable to have these conversations. It's doing these talks like this that cover the not just the prevention, the grief, the ripple. It's giving the full picture to people of what this event can do to families and the rawness and the longevity as well that it stays with families. We do a lot around creating safe spaces for people to have conversations, to know what questions to ask their loved ones and themselves if they're worried about someone. Services, so counselling service, which Lucy will talk more about later on, and signposting people in the skateboarding industry to services that already exist. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel and create lots of new services. We always try and think, how could we have helped Ben? How could we have navigated him to services or to help to make that easier? Because when people are in that dark place, picking up a phone and just going to the doctors or making an appointment or reaching out to a friend is impossible. So the Ben Ramers Foundation is all around how do we support people, what do they need, and how do we give it to them sooner before they get to crisis mode. I'll hand back to Lucy now because she's going to cover suicide grief.
Okay, so suicide grief. So suicide grief is different to grief. It is grief with the volume turned up. It comes in tsunami waves at any point, and it's grief that comes with no closure. When me and Chess put this together, I think this was just the perfect analogy of what we were experiencing as a family, having never gone through suicide loss. And actually, I'd never really experienced grief before. So going from losing a sibling and it to them being suicide, we were just completely broken as a family. I remember when I found out in May 2019, and with Ben being a professional skateboarder, before we could come to terms with what had actually happened, the world knew about it. So as a family, we were kind of trying to piece together, trying to make sense of what was happening, and there was just noise coming from every angle. Social media just completely blew up, and social media has some incredible things, and we're doing some incredible things through the foundation and with it, which is amazing. But there's also times on it where it's really challenging. It's a really challenging place to be in. Even if you want to remove yourself from it, it's almost impossible to. So with my grief, I think for the first 6 months, I was in complete shock. I hadn't processed it. And this is extremely normal when you have lost someone to suicide. And actually, I think grief in itself, it's never linear and it's so different for everyone. But something I've found in other charities that we've spoken to around that support people around suicide, loss and grief, around 6 months is about the time when you really start to process it. So when I lost Ben, I was actually hairdressing in Ipswich, completely different to obviously what I'm doing now. And the room that Ben was supposed to move into a room with my cousin Chess. Now, as I was living in Ipswich, as I was working in hairdressing, I knew for a long time this wasn't what I wanted to do. And then as soon as I lost Ben, it really made me realise and see how precious life really is. And I just thought, so I need to change. It's time to change. And so I messaged my cousin Chess and just said, I don't know if that room's still available. And then against the odds, it absolutely was. And Chess was like, I couldn't get anyone to kind of move into it. It didn't feel right. So then I moved in and started a new chapter with my cousin. COVID then hit, and with the world stopping, I had no choice other than to sit in my grief, which is something that, being totally honest, I was finding it much easier to run from. We'd started creating the foundation. So we started creating the foundation. So within that, I had a real focus. And I think, albeit that was happening at a time that was helping, I needed to sit and process my grief. So sitting in that when COVID stopped, I had so many unanswered questions, the pain of processing losing Ben, and just feeling so much unbelievable guilt that I should have saved him, I should have done something. That just ate away at me. It became impossible to try and navigate through. And I was just lucky that I had my cousin Chess with me through that. But my two brothers, I've got two other brothers, and they were experiencing grief as well. But our grief, we were grieving so differently, it ripped us apart. And that was another layer that then brought another sense of loss. So my brothers had to step away from me because I was in so much pain and I was behaving extremely erratic. But of course I was, because of how much the pain I was going through. So again, that another sense of loss, it was just very, very layered. So I'm going to pass back over to my cousin Chess to talk a bit more about grief from her side.
Suicide grief, as Lucy mentioned, there's no timeline to it. I think the key thing that I've noticed as well, and what I would share with anyone who has a loved one that experiences this, is when you first lose someone, you have the whole armies and villages around you supporting you. And then those 6 months hit and the funeral's been done, that person's gone back to work usually, life is resumed, everyone else has resumed. And I think from looking at Lucy as an outsider, that's at the time when it was the loneliest and hardest, because you don't have that army around you. And then I think what Lucy was going through inside, in terms of her thoughts and sort of where she was mentally, everyone else has moved on, and she's having to deal with it for the first time really in her own head. I think COVID was the best thing and the worst thing that happened to me and Lucy. I thank the world in terms of our bubble that COVID happened, because it meant Lucy, although she deteriorated and I had to watch that pain, she came up eventually. And I think if life had just carried on at the pace of what she was doing and the distractions of the world, she would have kept going. And then we'll go on to the suicide ripple in a minute. But I think that would have, I thank my lucky stars, Lucy's here today as well. And grief is a huge part of that and the ripple that comes from it. I think suicide grief is different for every single person. I can't sit here and go, here's the textbook of 10 things to do. But what I would say is suicide grief hits them so mentally and physically. Things like even be able to have a shower and eat and just to look after themselves on a day-to-day, I think is near impossible. That's where you need the people around you. And also, one day that person could be fine and you think, oh, okay, they're feeling better. And the next day it's the complete opposite. And you have to just go with those sort of emotions, and also just create that I kept saying to myself, I just need to make Lucy feel safe and Lucy feel loved. And even if that was cooking a cake that we didn't eat afterwards. I think it's things like that, just for that person to feel like there is someone there and they're not alone. And also, I don't need to fix Lucy. I don't need to have the answers. I just need to be here for her in a non-judgmental way to talk about her grief, or if she doesn't want to talk, just being in a room with her, watching a film. So I think that's the thing with grief. People get scared of, how do I help this person? How do I deal with it? But I think it's a human instinct of just love and consistency for that person, and having consistency of, even if it's one or two or a few people in their lives, that they know no matter what I go through, that person's there. That's what I would say around suicide grief. And I totally appreciate that that's difficult to do if you're not in a COVID bubble, because everyone's got their own lives going on as well. But that's also when it's not down to just one person. You've got to have a few people around that person to support them, to be there, to be checking in. None of this, I hope you're well, more of a, what can I do today for you? Be there for that person. And even if they don't respond, it doesn't matter. They would have felt that, and they will know that you're there. So that's what I would say around grief. And I'll hand back to Lucy now, because she's going to cover the ripple effect.
So 135 people impacted for every suicide. I think this actually is a lot larger, but this is kind of a rough, though that really kind of, I think 135 people, the really immediate people, 65% more likely to make a suicide attempt, and 80% are more likely to leave work after losing someone to suicide. So the ripple is just as important as the word suicide. We lost Ben to suicide, and the ripple nearly took me. So my grief just became so unbelievably loud, so painful to understand. I then started experiencing depression, and like Chess was touching on, I was struggling to shower, I was struggling to get out of bed. With COVID, everything stood still. And I think I was sitting within that pain, a pain that I was struggling to make sense of and completely struggling to cope in. My depression became so bad that I then started experiencing suicidal ideation. The suicidal ideation at first started, it was just thoughts, and quite fleeting thoughts. But then as time went on, these just got louder, and then I ended up having a plan to end my life. Living with my cousin Chess saved my life. I think from this talk you can just hear how incredible she is, but how important. You don't need to, not knowing the answers, you're not going to have the answers, but just giving someone love and creating that space for someone to feel safe, heard, seen, and supported. So as I was completely declining, I'll never forget the day Jess sat me down, and she said the words to me, "Are you feeling suicidal, Cuz?" And it was the first time I had admitted out loud that I was feeling suicidal, and it was instantly like a weight was just being taken off of me. I felt seen, I felt heard, I felt like it was okay, because I was extremely frightened in my own head of what I was experiencing, what my family had already been through, what we'd been through as a family through Ben. There was just so much, it was so complex, and again so layered of what was coming up for me. But Chess asked me just straight up, outright, "No, you're not thinking, of doing anything." She said, "Are you feeling suicidal, Cuz?" And in that, I just broke down, and I just said yes, and I instantly felt seen, heard, and safe. And now I know when asking people that question, everyone's response is different. Everyone experiencing suicidal ideation is extremely different. They may not want to admit it right now, or also they might say it, and then it might bring up completely different emotions for them, but this is just coming from my own personal perspective and how I felt at that time, and how just asking that question, what that did for me and what that gave me. So after me and Chess sat through and spoke through exactly what was going on for me, she booked me a doctor's appointment. It was something that I was struggling to do. I was struggling to shower. The thought of picking up the phone was absolutely petrifying. She practically carried me to the GP appointment, and the doctors, they prescribed me medication. Medication isn't for everyone, but it was something that really, really helped me through that period of my life. Alongside that, the NHS put me on a list for counselling, and again, it's something that I'd never had, and something that, reflecting on from where I was at, what I struggle, it's a struggle thinking about what that could have given to Ben. But again, it was an extremely long time until therapy would have kick-started for me. And my cousin then spoke with her work and got me funded therapy sessions, which kick-started a whole process of self-growth, self-worth, past traumas being processed, my grief around Ben, my guilt, and it was absolutely life-changing, and probably one of the main reasons why I am here today, on my journey to becoming a therapist one day. Now I'm going to hand back over to my cousin Chess around the ripple.
So yeah, just to add on the ripple in terms of, I suppose, from my perspective, because people always ask, how do you, there's the person obviously like Lucy going through the that journey, not journey, sorry, that's the wrong word, that sort of timeline of the suicidal thoughts and ideation, and I think that day when Lucy accepted the doctor's appointment, what I will add to that is probably there was probably 2 months prior to that of building her up to that. So it was sort of talking about, I can get you help when you want it. And then that day was sort of when Lucy was ready to accept it. I feel like if I hadn't done the bit before, she might not have accepted it. So it's sort of what I'm trying to share here is, again, it's that consistency of creating that barrier and safety net for that person, so that when they do want the help, it's been built up slowly and they know it's there. And so that then sort of it was a combination of, I'm here for you, but also Lucy wanting at that day to go to the doctors. And I think it's that consistency and as well of sort of love and support, and there is help out there. You're not alone. It's sort of that language and use of that, because Lucy was in no sort of headspace to be able to access that help herself. I think in terms of looking after myself, it's similar to what I was saying earlier about if we weren't in COVID, you put more people around you. For me to be able to fully focus on Lucy, I had a little background of sort of a few family members that were helping me. Because of COVID, they couldn't be there physically, but you need that, because you're not the person that can save someone. You can be there in that role, but you can't carry that responsibility, because then it's just far too much. You've got to put the support around yourself, the services for Lucy around. It's a people say when you have a baby you need a village around you. I think it's similar with this situation. When Lucy got really, really bad, and I would that part where she was very suicidal, I did sort of have to have self-talk to myself of, if Lucy does take her own life, the same as Ben, one day I will respect her decision is the wrong word, but you can't carry it in that moment, because it's you're there to love and look after them. And suicide as well, when you lose someone to suicide and you get those questions of, oh, why did they do it? Or that question of why did they do it? That's the one question that me and Lucy will never have answered about Ben. we don't, yes, you can sit here and go, we have some ideas that, you know, the skateboarding pressures, the wanting the normal routine, the escapism, the trauma from childhood, but we're never going to have that, Ben, this is why I took my life. And the same with Lucy's. That's what I had to say to myself. If Lucy does take her life, I won't have that question answered, but that's okay. And that's, unfortunately, that is what suicide leaves you with when that person's gone. When people die from other causes, you always have the answer, whether it was cancer, whether it was a car crash, whether it was old age. Suicide is unanswered, and that's probably one of the hardest things. And with the ripple, you think, oh, is this another unanswered question I'm going to have? I think it's the last thing I would just say is around that, non-judgmental. So there was no judgment there for me to Lucy of, you know, her worry about what my family have gone through. I can't put them through that again. There was no judgment there of any of that. It was just the priority of creating that safe space for her to feel heard, and answering those questions of, are you feeling suicidal? Have you got a plan? Where were you thinking of doing it? How are you thinking of doing it? You know, they're hard questions, but they are questions that should be asked to that person so that they feel like they can share. And the last thing I would say is, when I wasn't with Lucy, I would leave her a list near her bed of, if you're worried, these are the numbers to call. If you feel like this, these are your steps to take. Because again, you can't, although COVID meant I was there, in real life, you're not there every second next to that person's bedside or house. So you've got to put other toolkits in place for them to feel safe as well. So I'll hand back to Lucy for the last part of the talk.
Okay, so how to support someone experiencing suicide grief through our eyes. So this is, like me and Chess said, this is, our lived experience and what we needed and we feel is important, through our own eyes. So at the time when I lost Ben, as I said before, I was a self-employed hairdresser. My main concern was financial worry. That was the biggest thing for me, and also my entire family. With my mum battling addiction. She's now in a nursing home due to her alcohol. She's got alcohol-induced dementia. So with that, she didn't have financial support to support me to fund the funeral. My brothers were in a similar position. We were all, quite self-sufficient, but again, it wasn't something that was really in place for us to take that time out, to have that time to grieve. So a GoFundMe page was actually set up to get Ben a bench at Victoria Skate Park in London, which has now been renamed Rainer Skate Park. And the money that was raised was to support us as a family as well. And I think the most amazing part of it was, I guess, how everybody wanted to support us and the generosity, but also we had that time to grieve as a family. Financial worry is one of the biggest things that we see, and I see through my casework as well. Families that are going through grief, suicide grief, and needing that time to have that respite, but physically can't. So I think the financial worry was an area that, having support from loved ones and people wanting to help, that was a huge support to us, to have a bit of quiet time. It's not possible to kind of fund a year off or anything, but even we just had a month just to have that time, just to be like, okay, you need this time as a family. Alongside this, when I first lost Ben, I was talking so much about Ben. I mean, the irony, I still am today. But it was that first bit. Some of my friends, I remember them saying, when they lost people, they just shut down. But I wasn't. I was talking. I wanted to talk about Ben. I wanted to hear his voice. I wanted to watch videos of him. I wanted to keep him alive as much as possible. And I think at that real first early stage, it was doing something for me. It was helping me, and having friends around me just to sit with me, just to sit and listen and just be with me, And like my cousin Tess said, I think just being in a room with me and not even talking sometimes, that was everything and more that I needed in that time, to be held, maybe, not physically, literally in every other way possible. You're being held in that space, in that moment, in that time. Another thing that I got inundated with flowers, which is such a lovely gesture and something that I can completely understand where it's coming from, but actually something that we say, it was actually something else in front of me physically dying, and I didn't have it was gorgeous because I got so many, but it was something else dying in front of me, and something else that I had to make an effort to try and put somewhere or do something with. So simply having messages of people, just beautiful messages of support and love, meant the world, far more greater in that time of what I needed. Especially also something else that I experienced is in Ipswich. It was quite a small town. I don't know if anyone knows Ipswich, where I did live, and I would be walking along, and I would see people spot me and cross the road, because I guess fear around what to say and thinking they were going to say the wrong thing. You may say the wrong thing, but actually the best thing to do is just go up to someone, even give them a hug if you're not a hugger, and just be like, I'm so sorry, and then see what that response is. Having that acknowledgement is so important in the time of when you're grieving. And I think seeing people kind of swerve me was difficult as well. I've lost Ben, but ultimately I am still Lucy, and having that support and that love, and people just being there and just being like, I'm so sorry, it speaks volumes and means the world. So yeah, I'm just going to pass over to my cousin Jess.
I would add, send a hot meal or send a delivery voucher, or those frozen cook meals instead of flowers. Lucy couldn't, cooking and eating was way low on her capability. So if you can send someone a hot meal, a delivery, or a voucher over flowers, it's going to help them physically, mentally, so much more. I would say send the loving messages, like Lucy said, but also send some normality to them as well. I remember sending Lucy some pictures from my sister-in-law's hen do, and her reaction later on was just, that helped me so much to just laugh for a second and to feel that there was other things going on in life than just losing Ben and her grief. So don't be afraid to bring some humour and normality to those people's noise that they receive. My pet hate in life is hope you're well. Ask someone how they are. How are you today? You break it down, make it easy for them, send that message, and then they can just focus on, yeah, how am I feeling today? And if they don't reply, that's fine, but they will feel heard. None of this hope you're well. Let me know what I can do to help. Lucy hasn't got a clue what she needs help with right now. Actually, send a message of, what's one thing I can do today to help you? ? Again, they might not reply, but it's that resource, that support, which really helps. Social media as well. When people, and I understand why, everyone deals with grief differently, but if you lose someone and you post a social media message about that person, just take a second to think about who else is going to see this and what impact could that have. Do I really need to post this, or do I really need to use these words, these pictures? You don't know how triggering that could be for a family member that sees that post. So I think there's some pause moments I think more people can do around social media posts when they lose someone. And I suppose the last thing I would add is when anniversaries come up as well, for that person that they've lost. So at work, I know a few people that have lost people to suicide. I have a note in my calendar of that date, and all I do is send them a little Teams message that morning to just say, I'm aware what today is for you, and I'm here if you want a coffee at any point, and and because anniversaries are difficult, even first one, second one, third year, fourth one, and they're hard because everyone else is just carrying on with life. But if you've got those few people that can pause and hold that space of I remember this, and I've got a feeling that today might be difficult for you, again, they just feel heard and held. So they're my few little things that I've learned from Ben, from Lucy, and now if I know someone else is going through it, how I try and just pass that on to other people.
I think as well, something else to bring to the forefront is the use of language as well. So I mean, it's something that prior to Ben, losing Ben, I definitely was using. So when we say the word commit, so commit suicide, commit comes from a time when it was actually considered a crime. And for someone who has lost someone to suicide, hearing that word can be really triggering and difficult to hear. So we really, really want to kind of make an effort to get that, I guess, that use of that word commit really, really kind of taken away now. And we say died by suicide or took their life. Another one as well, that I think has been floating around, it's complete. And that again is quite difficult and quite wincy for someone that's lost someone to suicide. So died by suicide or took their life. I think also something else to add is, you know, when I was speaking to people about it, even now, I say, oh yeah, he took his life. And I think people still quite get worried about saying, oh, you know, he, you know, around said let's break through the stigma. He died by suicide, and normalizing these conversations, I think is really, really important. And hearing his name, you know, my brother Ben, you know, and still speaking about, I speak about him all the time, potentially not so much as I used to, but I think that's where my grief is. My grief has taken me now. But I think, yeah, when you're speaking to someone who's lost a loved one, suicide, talk to them, to, you know, call them by their name. So a few signposting support links that we've got. So if you're based in London, there is an organisation called James's Place. It's an incredible organisation, and it's if you have a loved one, you can do a self-referral, or if you are struggling yourself and you're struggling with suicidal ideation and you have a plan in place, this is an organisation that you can go to. You can go into there, and then it's a 8-week program with, you've got a psychotherapist, and they work you through that point of crisis. At the EIC, we're not a crisis service, but we have loads of signposting support for organisations that can help if you're really struggling with suicidal thoughts. The Hub of Hope is amazing as well. It's almost like a yellow pages for mental health support. So you can just pop your postcode in, and then it can tell you all the support that's available to you. Another one also which has now started is 111 have now got support for people in a mental health crisis. So if you've got a loved one that is struggling and they are at that point of crisis, 111 there now have trained professionals. So we're coming a long way in the world of mental health. We've got a long way to go. But yeah, big movements. And then on the foundation, we've got lots of psychoeducation pieces, which we put out on social media, which are really good. So all around kind of mental health, so helping your well-being, supporting yourself, and lots, again, useful signposting, as well as on the amazing EIC, we've got lots of signposting as well. So access for assistance, if anything's come up for you today, the EIC is here to help you. If you've been bereaved you've lost someone to suicide, this has been quite triggering, we're here to talk, and we've got some amazing support that we can help with, so like therapy support, which is why I'm so proud to work for the EIC, to be able to get everyone within the industry and within their household, if they do need that therapy support, that's there and accessible for them. So thank you so much for attending the Wellbeing talk today. Yeah, we're open for some questions. I think I've kind of lost track of time, but I think we're doing okay for time. I don't know, Marcy, if questions have popped up in the chat.
You're doing great for time. Not specific questions, but people just saying what powerful talk it's been, and thank you for sharing your experiences. And just something I wanted to touch on, and it's the whole, I mean, I was always one for sending flowers on occasions, and it wasn't until you and I had a conversation and then you'd said, God, you're running around trying to find vases and trying to keep these things alive, and not to make light of anything, but you said, someone turned up with toilet roll, shampoo, conditioner, and
Yeah.
Chess said, delivering a hot meal, a care package, things that you physically couldn't get out to purchase, and someone brought to you. So obviously you guys have got a very, very close relationship. So what I just would like to ask is, how would you encourage someone who's maybe just not as close to someone, whether it's a colleague or a friend, and they see someone suffering? How would you approach the conversation, just to we talk about breaking barriers and stigma. So someone that you don't have particularly great relationship with, but you're recognising that someone is struggling, how would you best approach that?
Jess, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I actually, we've done this at work in our law firm, especially because it's the corporate world, but also we're all in a virtual space now. So we always do a lot around, if you notice it, for example, if you're on a video call like this at work and you notice someone is just not quite themselves, just sending that message afterwards saying, just checking in how you are today. And if they don't reply, they don't reply. But we all have human instinct and we pick up on cues and people's behavior. And what I would say is, you're a better person by sending the message rather than overthinking, are they going to get offended by me asking? It's better to ask than not to ask, and you don't need to wait for 10 video calls to get your, okay, I'm now sure Marcy's not all right, I'm going to ask Marcy if she's okay after this call. Just send it. And again, I think it's those little things like in emails, which we all communicate in. If someone is really struggling and you put, hope you had a good weekend, hope you're well and had a good weekend, that person might have had the most horrendous weekend, and when they read that, inside they just go, I couldn't be opposite, but there's no channel or output for them to actually voice how they are. So in emails as well, just how are you, how was your weekend? Again, people might not reply, but you just start to slowly break this stigma down of we're all these perfectionists at work that are we're just cracking on, we just keep going, everything at home is put to one side. Bring it into the day-to-day work, and don't be afraid to ask, because like I said, you're better to ask than not, because that's what we always say about Ben, just ask. If they don't reply, it's fine, they feel heard, they're not going to be offended at all.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that's something that we do at, the EIC, being on the welfare team, and supporting people and things, and especially I think that's something bringing to work. I've had times with the girls where I'll be on the team call and I'll just be like, I am really struggling today. And I think that's come I think from lots of being more open and honest with myself and being like, it's okay to not be okay. And I think seeing that in someone else is, again, like what Chess said earlier, you're not holding all that responsibility for that person. And I think sometimes when your gut's telling you something, it's a time to say, okay, I've just, how are you getting on? Or I've noticed that you don't quite seem yourself. Here for a coffee at any point. Or do you fancy a coffee as well? I think, like what Jess said earlier, just saying, this coffee's here, I want to go with you for this coffee. And not holding that, you cannot, it's not, you can't be a lifeline for someone, you can't save someone, you can just be there for them. So just creating those spaces. And the power of listening. I think as humans, we all feel like we need to have the answer, and we need to say, I know what you're going through. I think that was something as well, which after losing Ben, I had someone say to me, I know exactly what you're going through. I lost my grandma. And I remember turning around saying to her, you absolutely have no idea what I'm going through. And that's okay. But I think it's trying to be, we're relational beings, we're trying to relate to each other, but just listen, just listening and just being there and staying with that pause with them. If they start getting upset, just hold them in that space. I know it's easy said than done, because I think we just want to make things better, but sometimes you can't, and that's okay. But just being there, listening to them and staying with them, there's so much power in that.
Yeah, for sure. There have been some other questions popped on, but I think you've kind of covered that topic. And I suppose it's just like people who have had friends, family who have died by suicide, and it's the guilt that they may be carrying around, because the challenge is, and I remember for myself, having to ask the first person that had this crisis call with to actually ask someone, are you feeling suicidal? It's such a difficult question to ask, but the importance is just, you could potentially be saving someone's life. So
yeah, I remember when I was so petrified of asking Ben, are you feeling suicidal? Because I thought, I'm going to put a plan in his head. Of course you're not. It's a complete myth. And that was something I had to do a lot of therapy work through, was that guilt of not asking him. So when Chess asked me, and then now, I mean, I must ask the question 600 times a year, are you feeling suicidal? And it's just your I think being really being cautious of just your tone when you deliver it, and the space when you do it. So if you do want to ask someone that question, your gut's telling you to, it's just not picking when you're in a cafe or somewhere really, really busy, saying, I really would love to grab a coffee, or go and check in on them, going for a walk. And something that really helped me when I was struggling, me and Chess, when we used to drive, we used to be in the car, I used to talk. I could talk and talk and talk. And I would find we'd go walking in COVID, around the parks, we'd walk, and I would really open up. So I think it's about just being mindful of those places and those times of when giving people that real space that they need, and the environment.
Yeah. Paul Church has put something on here, and he's basically saying it's hugely brave of you to be so vulnerable and share your story, and he sincerely thanks you. But his takeaway for today has been that he will stop starting emails by saying, hope you're well. And I think we're all really guilty of doing that, me particularly. So that is definitely a takeaway for me. The talk today has been amazing, Lucy. You just inspire me every day. Jess, you're incredible. The relationship and the love that is between you is just phenomenal. Obviously, today we've kind of tried to encapsulate everything in like a 45-minute call. I just want to kind of let everyone know that here at the EIC, we're so passionate about getting these messages out. We can tailor any kind of training packages. We do mental health awareness courses, mental health first aiders, we do suicide prevention courses. It's so important that we get the message out there and we break the stigma and the barriers. And me personally, thank you both for being so raw and so real. No one ever wants to be in your guys' position, to be, setting up foundations for loved ones. But I think what I'm taking away from this today is the bravery. A lot of people can just close the door and not, you're keeping your brother's memory going, and you're also saving life. So personally, I want to thank you for that. And I just echo everything that's been put in this chat here. You'll get a chance to read it later on, but everyone is just appreciating you and thanking you for, bringing this to the forefront and being so brave. So thank you both for that. I don't know if you want to kind of close up with any kind of...
Jess, anything you want to...
Just to say thank you to everyone for giving up their time to learn and to listen, because sometimes these talks, I know, can feel a bit like, oh yeah, I should attend that, but to just actually, you've opened your ears and you've taken things in, and if you take one thing away and you put it into practice, just a huge thank you, because that's what we need everyone to be doing. We don't all need to become amazing therapists and fix everyone. It's the day-to-day little nuggets. So thank you if you take one of those away and you actually put it in practice today, tomorrow, or a month. So yeah, a huge thank you.
Yeah, and a huge thank you for being part of it. I think the reason when me and Chess started this is to break through these stigmas and barriers, and to be really open and honest and have these conversations and normalize them. So just, a huge thank you for listening to our story and just being a part of a conversation that we need to all be having more of. And like Jess said, if you take one thing away from today, then yeah, super happy. And yeah, big thank you to everyone.
Perfect. And just a kind of closing statement from one of the listeners who had said, thanks so much for sharing. This has been so informative. One of our friends is currently going through a really tough patch, and she will try and implement some of these pointers to help and support her. So I think that's lovely. So guys, thank you so much. Thanks for taking your time out this morning and joining our wellbeing talk, and we will see you next month. This has been recorded and it will be distributed later. So Lucy, Francesca, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ooh.